Hi, this is Robin, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how to remove edge halos on selections in Photoshop. Before I begin though, I just want to define what are halos in case you don't know the term. So they're also referred to as fringes and sometimes matting. They are the bright, and it can be dark, bands or rings that are around the outer edges of subjects or objects. And they can be caused by a number of things, including from making selections and not getting an exactly accurate selection. They can come from over-sharpening your images. They can come from lens artifacts and a number of other things that can cause halos. So just to give you an example here, I brought up these birds. So as you can see, around the perimeter of each of these birds is this white fringe or white halo. So that's what a halo looks like if you've been lucky enough not to see it in your images. But if you do make composites and you do have to make selections, it's inevitable that you will end up with some fringing like this. So that's what I'm trying to show you how to get rid of, are these white halos around the outer edges of objects that are caused when you make selections. So what I'm going to do in this video is demonstrate 3 different methods to get rid of these unwanted halos that are caused by the remnants of a background color that either stays attached to a selected subject or object or is reflected onto that object, so there's still a trace of it around the edges of the object. A couple things. I'm going to work with all stock images in this demo so that it's easier just to grab some examples that you can see more easily. I'm also going to just work with portrait shots, so people, but the methods I'm showing can be used for any subject. So you could use it for something like the birds and nature, you could use it for landscapes, you could use it for all sorts of objects, product shots, etc. So even though I'm working with people, just know that you can use it with all sorts of objects and subjects, and I will use those terms interchangeably, object and subject, so just so you know what I'm talking about. Now, the 3 tools that I'm going to show, or the 3 methods I'm going to show to remove these fringing halos around the edges of objects, are the minimum filter, the smudge tool, and the healing brush. And I always like to show you a variety of tools just because some tools work better than others on different images. So that way, if you learn a few options, if one doesn't work on a particular image of yours, you can try one of the others. What I'm going to do is what I typically do, and I'll put the start times for each of the 3 demos in the description below the video. So that way, if you want to hop around or if you want to come back to the video, you can just go right to the demo you want and you don't have to go through the whole video. Now, the thing is here, so as I mentioned, a haloing can occur when you shoot a subject, for instance, against a white background. Know you want to use it to composite into another scene. You select it, and then you want to put it onto a dark background. Well, the same thing, the inverse can happen too, when you've shot a subject against a dark background and then want to put that selected subject onto a light-colored scene. So that's one way to get rid of it, is these different methods that I'm showing you if they don't get fully selected or when you make your selection. The thing to keep in mind is if you are using a similar background color when you're doing your compositing, it's not an issue. So if you have a contrasting color, so you shot on white and then you're putting something into a dark scene, that's when it's an issue. That's when there's contrast and the halo will show up. If you're putting something that was shot against a white background into a similarly light background, don't waste your time removing the halos because it probably won't show up. Only spend the time if you can see them and they're distracting. Now, just a quick reminder before I get into these 3 demos. If you'd like YouTube to send you a single alert when I add new content to my channel, just click the subscribe button and the black bell icon that's right below this video. It's free to do it, and you'll only do it once. So if you've already subscribed, you're all set. So that said, let me close out this picture and let's get started with demo number 1. Okay, so In this demo number 1, I'm going to show how to use the minimum filter to remove halos in Photoshop. So as you can see, I've got 2 images here. So I have this model who was shot against a white backdrop, and I want to composite her into this nighttime background scene. So you can see, again, she's coming from a light background and going into a dark background here. So the first thing you would do if you want to do something like that is to select your subject or object. And again, I'm going to use the terms interchangeably for people and things. So if I say one or the other, it means the same thing. So for something like this, I would probably use the object selection tool, make sure that's active in the toolbar. That's the box with the arrow going into it. And then I'd come up to the top of the interface, the Photoshop interface, and just click on select subject and let Photoshop do its thing. And there you can probably see along the edges of her, we now have the marching ants saying that Photoshop has made a selection. And again, I'm not going to spend time on making composites or good composites because I really just want to focus in this video on how to remove the halos. So I have some pre-baked things to show you here. So typically then once you get your selection, you would use your move tool, which is that X right there, that cross, and then you'd move your subject into your background scene. But I'm not going to do that. I have already moved that subject into this scene and resized her just to save time for this video. So I'm going to click on this, and again, you would have gone through that other process. Now, if we look at this, by the way, so if you're hoping to learn how to do the selections and the compositing, what I will do is I have other videos on my channel about how to make selections and how to create basic composites. So what I will do is I will put links to them in the description below this video in case you need a refresher about how to get to this stage, okay? So once we have your selection moved into the scene, you can see, again, because she came from being shot against a white background to a dark background, and I'm going to blow it up so you can see better, we're now seeing the halos. So see the halos along the edge of her body here, and so that's not a good thing, and it's not good for a realistic look if you're making composites. So let me just position this here so we can see the halos better. Okay, so now, as I said, we're going to use the minimum filter in this first demo. So what we want to do is we have our selection on its own layer. So let me just turn these off so you can see for a moment. So she, since I moved her over, is now on a transparent layer, and you see the backgrounds because the background behind her is transparent, so you're seeing through to the lower layers. So what you want to do is make your selection with your selection or your subject layer active. You want to activate that selection. So Control or Command and click on that, left click on that thumbnail. And if you look at the image, you can see that that has reactivated the marching ants selection along the subject that was composited in. So now what you want to do is add a mask that represents that selection. So bottom of your layers panel, here's my layers panel up here, come down to the bottom, go to this icon that looks like a box with a circle in it. That's the add layer mask icon, and left click on that icon. And you can see on that layer, we now have a layer mask. And if I Alt or Option click on that mask, you can see that the model is active and visible because she's in white, and the background is going to be hidden because it's covered in black. So I'll Alt or Option left click on that again to make that go back and just be able to see the scene. Now, in order to remove the halo, first of all, you need to make sure that your mask that you just created is active. And to know it's active, be sure there's a white frame around it. See the white frame there? It almost looks like a halo. So then from there, with that active, we'll go up to the filter menu at the top of the interface, left click on that, come down to where it says about halfway or just below halfway, it says Other, and then come to the flyout menu to minimum. So filter, other, minimum, and left click on that. And we get this pop-up box here, okay? So now I want to pull this slider handle all the way to the left to talk about this for a moment. So let's just look at what's in this pop-up box so you know how to set yours if it isn't already set up. So you can see it says minimum, so we're in the minimum filter. I always keep mine set to preview clicked on, so you can click that off or on. I like to have it on so I can see what's happening. The next thing that we'll come down to is preserve roundness. Right here, there's two options, roundness or squareness. Now, I like to use roundness when I am not working with a geometric subject or object because it will conform to the rounded shapes of your subject better, and it will give you more granular radius settings. So here's the radius setting right here. So you can see the furthest to the left is 0.2 or 0.2, depending on how you like to say it, pixels. And if you had it set to squareness, it would only be whole numbers. You wouldn't get the granularity of the decimals. So not only is she not geometrically shaped, and you want it to not get pixelated and jaggy along the edges, you also want to have the granularity in terms of decimal point pixels. So be sure you use roundness and start from the far left. Now what we're going to do is move that handle towards the right gradually in very slow steps until we see the halo disappear. Okay, so I will slide it just a little bit and then release just to see. And you can watch over here versus, because the number I'm using won't be of any use to you because you'll have to look for your own image. So you can just sort of watch and see if the halo is disappearing as I move this pull handle to the right. And again, I'm just doing a little at a time and releasing. I'm using a left mouse click to pull that. And that's looking pretty good to me. So I think I'm not really seeing those white halos that we saw when I first showed you the image open up. So it now has a radius of 3.9 pixels using minimum, and it's on preserve roundness. Something to keep in mind, and that's why I'm saying go slowly and release and just, you know, kind of inch your way up, because the lower you keep this slider value here, in other words, the farther left it is, the slider is, or the smaller the number is, the better it will be to maintain your image details. So don't crank it up any more than you have to. Okay, so once you get that so that you're not seeing the halos, you can left click OK in this box and it goes away. And that's looking pretty good to me. So let's just see here for a moment. Yeah, see, so if I turn that off and on, you can see that's minimum filter has done a very nice job of getting rid of those halos that were around the edges of her body by having gone from being shot on a white background and being composited into a dark background. So that is it for the minimum filter. So that's the end of demo number 1, and using the minimum filter to get rid of halos. So in demo number 2, I'll show you how to use a different approach with the smudge tool. So I'm going to pause this until I get those images in here so you don't have to watch me do all the housekeeping stuff. Okay, so now we're going to move on to demo number 2. And in demo number 2, I'll show how to use the smudge tool to remove halos that are formed by selections in Photoshop. And these are the 2 images that I'm going to work with. And again, these are both stock photos. Now, as you can see, this is the inverse of what I showed you in demo number 1. So we have this young athlete who was shot against a dark background. And in the first demo, I showed you a model shot against a white background. And we're going to put him, coming from his dark background, onto a lighter background as in doing this composite. Now again, I'm not going to take a lot of time to build the composite because the whole focus of this short video is to show you how to get rid of halos. So this time, as I said, I'm going to work with the smudge tool, and Again, I'm showing you both from light backgrounds and dark backgrounds and how the halos with them work using different tools. You can use any of these tools no matter whether you have a dark or a light halo. It's not that certain tools have to be used for certain color halos, okay? So the thing to keep in mind with the smudge tool is it is a lot more labor intensive than the minimum filter I just showed in demo number 1, where all I had to do was pull a slider and it did a very nice job getting rid of the halo. So I would say if you want to use the smudge tool option, it probably will be better for use on smaller areas rather than trying to cover a large area. So again, in this demo, it's the same process as I showed you in demo number 1 in terms of the first few steps that you would follow. So you want to have a subject and you want to get him into a different scene. So you would select your subject. So again, I always say duplicate your background so you're not working on your original background. Choose one of your selection tools. So I'm going to use the object selection tool, but you could also use the quick selection tool. And click select subject to select your subject. So there you can see Photoshop has done the work for you and made a selection and put marching ants around the perimeter of the object that you want to move into the new scene. If you have an older version of Photoshop and you do not have either the object selection tool or the subject select subject button, you also can use your quick selection tool and then just take it from there. It'll work the same process from that point on. So again, you would then, once you get your selection, use your move tool, which is that cross on the top of the toolbar, and just move that subject into your scene. So again, to save time, because we're focusing on halos, I have already done that. I've moved that young guy into this scene and I've resized him so he's more suitable for the size of the scene. They had mismatches of their sizing and resolution. Okay, so now again, if I make him a bit bigger, move him up here, you can see that he has got black halos along the outside of his body and his arms here, and it's probably up around his head too, but it's less obvious there. See, that's what I'm saying. If it's not obvious, don't waste the time fixing it, but it definitely is obviously outlined that he has dark halos here. So I want to not have those visible in a composite or it won't look very realistic, I guess is the for the lack of a better term. It's just not going to look photorealistic. All right, so again, we're going to do the same thing that we did in demo number 1, which is to activate this selection. So again, just to show you, since if you didn't see demo number 1, my subject is on a transparent layer. So the reason we're seeing the background is it shows through the transparency. So we just have him with his halos on his own layer, and that layer is active, which you can tell from the blue highlight here. So in order to work with this smudge tool, again, we have to make the selection around our subject active. So I'm going to press and hold the Control or Command key and left click on this thumbnail, and you can see that now Photoshop has reactivated the selection. And again, we want to, with the marching ants and the selection active, go to the bottom of the layers panel to the add new layer mask icon, which is this box with the circle in it. Left click on that. And again, if you look at the layer, you can see that now there is a mask on it. And you can see that he's active and the background is hidden. Okay. So that is good. That's where we want to be. So in order to remove the haloing with the smudge tool, again, we want to be sure that the mask is active. So on that active layer with the blue highlighting, make sure that there is a white frame around your mask, and that says that your mask is active. Now, we're going to come to the toolbar. Yours might be on the left side. Mine is docked right. And come down and look for this tool that looks like a finger pointing right here. This is the smudge tool. If you do not see it in your toolbar, right click on this little arrow that arrowhead that's next to it, one of the tools there, you might have the blur tool or the sharpen tool visible, and typically the smudge tool would be grouped with it. So I have customized my toolbar so that's where mine appears. So I keep the smudge tool handy because I like to use it for things like this. So if you have a blur tool or a sharpen tool, just right click on that little arrow and then you should be able to find the smudge tool, or come to the bottom of the toolbar, and you probably won't have the banana icon like I do, but if there's 3 dots, you can click on that and that will let you add the smudge tool to your toolbar. Okay, so I've got the smudge tool active, and you know it's active because there's that black behind it. Every tool in Photoshop has specific settings or options associated with it. So let's look at the options associated with the smudge tool that we may have to change. And the options bar is always across the top of the Photoshop interface. So this is the options bar, and these are the options for the smudge tool. Okay, so let's look here and see what we have. So first of all, I want to be using a soft brush. So when we click on this little area here, that shows you the types of brushes that are going to be used for the smudge tool. And there's usually a little size number underneath a little, what looks like the brush heads icon. And you can see I have it on a soft brush, so that's good. And I have the hardness very low. So the further you go to the right on a hardness slider, the harder it is. The further to the left, the softer. So that's good. We've got a soft brush. And let me just make sure that's up there. Okay, then we want to be sure that the mode, still in the option bar, is on normal. So I have mine set to normal. Some things you want to change it. So, but for this, I'm going to leave it on normal. The strength, I usually start, this is a little lower, I usually start around 20%. And then I adjust it down or up depending on how much it's needed. You want it to be, again, be very subtle. You don't want to be impacting the image. So you can either click that down arrow and slide the slider if you want to go up or down, or you can left click on the word strength and then left click and pull it to the left. So like this, and pull if you want to go up or down. So you have a choice. You can either do the down arrow for that, or you can slide on the word. And then because we're on a transparent layer, I always like to keep it on sample all layers. So those are the settings that are needed. I do not have it set so finger painting is clicked off. Okay, so we've got our smudge tool, we've got the mask active with the white frame around it, and we've got our options set. So now what we want to do is brush. So, and just so you can understand what you're seeing here, my brush, my smudge tool, is that black circle. The green highlighter is just to show you where I am on the screen. So the black is the size. So what I'm going to do is just left click and brush from the halo in towards the subject or object. So again, I'm making very small movements. And what I'm basically trying to do is, because I'm working on the mask, I'm trying to shove that mask behind the image a little, just tuck it underneath so that the halo goes away. And I'm going to tell you right now that I'm not going to spend a ton of time. And it's just, you know, and this is what I say. So each time I'm doing this, I'm clicking and pushing, click and push, click from the halo, push in towards the subject, click around the halo, push in towards the subject. So that's what I said. It's very labor intensive. So this is actually, would be a lot of work to do it on something like this. I personally would probably use the minimum tool if something was this big. But let me, again, push this black halo in behind his t-shirt. And if I was doing this for a real situation versus quick get you the principles of what to do, I'd spend a lot more time getting it more perfect. But I'm just going to, and again, maybe I can move this up a little bit. But again, as I said, you don't want that strength number too high, because otherwise it'll start impacting and pushing in your image too. Okay, And I think I'm going to maybe just, and the thing to keep in mind with this is, so if you get into a tight space, there's a number of things you can do. First of all, you can probably make your image bigger, but then you could also use your left bracket key, which I'm doing now, to make it the brush smaller, or your right bracket key to make the brush bigger. So if it's a tight space, you also can reduce the size of that smudge tool brush. Okay. All right, I think that's enough just to give you a sense of what it's doing. So let me just show you. So again, if I turn the mask off, you can see how intense it was before doing that nudging or smudging of the halo in towards the subject. And then after I've done that, it's improved it. And then you can see this is a very jaggy, low-res stock image. But I think, again, you get the idea. So you would just have to go around wherever on your subject you're seeing your halo and do that process of pushing from the outside in towards the subject. So that is the end of demo number 2, using the Smudge tool to get rid of a halo. And in my final demo, I will show you how to use the healing brush tool approach. So again, I'm going to pause and get the last image set up so you don't have to sit through all of that. This is going to be demo number 3, and in this third and final demo for how to get rid of halos, I'm going to show how to use the healing brush tool to remove halos here in Photoshop. Now again, we have a stock photo of a portrait, a headshot, a bust shot, whatever you want to call it, of a guy who was shot against a white backdrop. So the method I'm going to show you now would be really handy, let's say if you're doing catalog work, or if you just want to change to a different color background than this original. So let's say all you had handy to get a shot of him was against a white wall or something like that, but you want to make it look a little bit more interesting when you get back and start processing the picture. So this would be a way that you could change the color background pretty easily without compositing into an entirely new scenic background like I did in demo number 1 and number 2. So what we want to do is now, obviously, since I want to show the haloing, we're going to take him from being on a light background to a dark background and see what happens in terms of the haloing. So again, whenever I'm going to work with an image, I recommend duplicating the background. So in your layers panel with your background layer active, just either drag it to the bottom of the layers panel to that box with the plus for the add new layer icon, or do a Control or Command J to jump that background up until a duplicate layer. Now we've got that duplicated. What I want to do is select the subject. So again, with one of the selection tools active, and I'm going to use the object selection tool in the toolbar, which is this box with the arrow. I'm going to come to the top of the interface and just click on select subject and let Photoshop make the selection for me. And I don't know if you can see it, but he has added, you notice I called Photoshop a he, marching ants around the subject to select the subject. And I'm not going to worry too much about places it's missing because, again, this is not about making perfect composites. This is showing about how to deal with halos. Okay, so now that we have the subject, I'm going to jump him to his own layer. So again, Control or Command J, and you can see now he's on his own layer. And then I want to duplicate that layer. So I'm going to have 2 layers with him on the transparent background. I like to do it 2 times just because that way, if I want to reduce the opacity of how I've handled getting rid of the halos, I can do that. Also, it's easier to just do a check back and forth to see what it looks like with or without the halo and if I've gone overboard with it. So anyway, you can decide whether you just want to do it once or twice for you. You can experiment. So now, because I said I wanted to change the color background, what I want to do is add a solid color layer to the layer stack. So again, bottom of the layers panel, come to the circle with the line through it, which is the add new adjustment layer, left click on that. And the very first option is solid color. So I'm going to left click on that to get a new solid color background. And black is kind of boring. So why don't I, since it came up in the reds, maybe pick a nice maroon or something interesting like that. Let me get it a little darker so that we're sure to see any halos that might be there. And I'll click OK. Now, needless to say, because in Photoshop, as you build up layers, the higher up you go, it hides things below it. So what we want to do is we want him on top of the solid color background. So we're going to drag this layer to below the transparent layers. So there we go. So just dragged it down and released. And because both of these have transparent backgrounds, the transparent parts can see through to that new solid layer that you just added. And again, we can see that we do have, because he came from a white backdrop, this white haloing around him and around his beard. It's around his hair. It's around both parts of his body here. And again, just because we're trying to do this for a demo and get you the principles, I'm not going to do a perfect full selection. But as I said, in this demo, we're going to work with the healing brush. So now we go to the toolbar again. Here's the toolbar on my setup. I have it docked right. Yours might be on the left. Come down to the tools that look like band-aids. And this for me, the top tool for me is my remove tool. So I have to right click on that little arrowhead and come down to find the healing brush tool. So if yours isn't visible, you can go find it that way. The healing brush tool is the one that just looks like a plain old little band-aid. Okay, there's no other little icons around it. Once it's active, it'll have the black behind it. And again, you have to be sure when you're working with tools in Photoshop that you have the settings or the options that are associated with that tool set the way you want them. So with that healing brush active, come to your options bar, which is this bar that goes across the top of the workspace. And we want to make sure we have certain things set. So again, I want to be sure I'm working with a soft brush. And yeah, so this is pretty soft. So if we look here at hardness, it's down at a very soft level. If it was up at the right, that would be very hard. So anywhere down towards the left is a soft brush. So that's good for the brush softness. And then I want to be sure this time, so last time we worked with a normal mode, this time check and have mode on darken, because we're trying to darken white halos. So you can click on this little down arrow, and if yours is on normal or something else, you can change it to darken. So make sure mode reads darken. Just left click on that and be sure it says darken in the box. I definitely, and you definitely want the source to be sampled, because we're going to collect a sample and paint with the healing brush. So be sure that that says sampled. And also be sure it says aligned, because once I make this sample, I'm going to have it follow along a path that's parallel to the halo. So we want to keep that aligned. And again, because we're going to be working on a transparent layer, I want to be sure it says on sample, current and below. Okay, so we just want to be sure those settings are in place. It's optional if you want to do anything with diffusion or not. Okay, so we've got our healing brush tool selected in the toolbar. Make sure you're on your top layer, your selected layer, and this is, I'm just going to label this here, and this is the model on new color background. Okay, and it's just him, but with this color here. So make sure his layer is active and has the highlight color on it. Now, using the healing brush tool, what we have to do, as I said, is sample the color. And again, this time when we're looking at my highlighter here, look at the white circle. That is my brush. And let me see, I just want to make it a little bit bigger than it is. So don't make it too much bigger than the width of the halo, because you don't want it going all over. So I'll just keep it about that size. That's even a little bit big. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it better. I'll just use my left bracket, make that a little bit smaller. Okay, that's good. All right, so now to get your sample, you have to press and hold the Alt or the Option key. So pick an area that you want to be your frame of reference or your sample of content that you want to paint over the halo. So for me, I'm going to pick right about in here, because once I start painting, the sample point is going to be moving in parallel. So I want to be in a good place that doesn't have light areas. So I'm going to press Alt Option and see how that changed. Watch, I'll do it again. When I press Alt Option, what's the center of my green highlighter? See? So that's showing where it's going to collect the sample. Left click with your mouse, release the Alt or Option key, and let me just drag this over. So can you see on a clear place with his neck? That's the sample that we're painting with that's now inside the healing brush. And I'm going to start painting here because this is a different texture. So I'm going to start here for mine. And I'm just going to start painting along, and I'm going to try not to go outside the lines too much. It's, just try to stay sort of aligned with your halo. And as I mentioned, you can see, so see inside my green highlighter is the healing brush that I'm painting with. And if you look at about 7 o'clock there, just outside of the green highlighter, you see that cross. That is what's sampling to paint as I'm painting along the edge. So that's the path that's being used by the healing brush to paint over the halo. Okay, now again, this is a different texture here. So anytime you want to go in a different direction or you get a different texture, create a new sample. So now again, I'm going to come down to this area where we don't have a lot of the white, and I'm going and leave yourself room for the sample to travel. So I'm starting towards the right. So I'm pressing Alt or Option, left click to collect the sample, release the Alt or Option, and again, just start painting along the area that needs the filling. And again, I'm not going to be perfect with this because the point is just to get you the concept. Now, again, going down his sleeve, and this is where I'm saying it's important to know that you don't have to be able to go the whole path like I just did. So if I collect a sample here, so Alt Option, left click, collect, release, and start painting down, and look at where that cross is. That's below the highlighter. It's already going to get into the white area. So if you have the same thing happening where you're running out of path for the sample, start over again. Just collect another sample, Alt Option click, then come back over to your halo. And some of what I'm referring to as a halo here is halo, and some of it is just reflection from his white background onto his sweater. So again, I've run out of path. I'm going to come back over, leave yourself room for the path to go in. Okay, so I'm not, again, going to be too perfect about it. If you have something like I do with the beard fringe, the same kind of process will work. And so you can see where I've painted, it's done a very nice job. So if I turn that off, and that's why I like to have the duplicate layers, so you can just look and check yourself and see how things are working. The other reason for having the duplicate layers is if you say, gee, it's just a little bit too harsh, maybe if there's a little light, it'll soften the transition. So then with that top layer active, if you wanted to, in the layers panel, you can come right across here to where it says opacity. And if you left click on the word opacity or click on this little down arrow and drag, you can slightly lower the opacity if it's a little bit too much. So that was the final demo that I wanted to show you for how to remove halos that are caused by selections in Photoshop. And this method was using the healing brush tool. So I hope these 3 selections halo removal methods will be useful to you, and have fun experimenting with them and seeing how they work for your compositing efforts.